Welcome to this week's episode of NRL Offside. And JC, we begin this program on a somber note. Last Wednesday, news filtered through the Jai Arrow, the South Sydney and Queensland origin back rower, had announced what seemed to be his premature retirement from the NRL. But then we found out it was due to a truly devastating diagnosis of motor neurone disease, which is a horrible, horrible condition. That well and truly struck home in the following days when we watched the interview on the Today Show with Danica Mason, where the full extent of Jai's condition was laid bare. It was literally heart-wrenching to see Jai. Now, professional sports, and this includes the NRL, they sometimes live in their own little oblivious bubble. We think the most important thing in the world is who's going to make an origin team, what coach is on a hot seat, whether or not our team wins on Friday night. Jai's situation, along with Nathan Merritt's cancer diagnosis just a few months ago, it reminds us that there are things that are much, much bigger. In this case, a young father, husband, son, brother, is faced with a profoundly life-altering medical condition, and he has a very tough road ahead of him. Now, the good news, if there is any good news in this situation, is that the rugby league community is great at these type of things. Over the last 7 days, we've seen an outpouring of support for Jai. The community at large has just wrapped their arms around him. Now, it's highly unlikely that what we're saying here is going to reach Jai and his family, but we echo those sentiments. Jai, you're in our thoughts. We're sending our prayers, good vibes, mantras, whatever will help. Godspeed, mate. So sorry, JC, mate. It's a tough note to start the podcast, but I think it's really necessary. How are you, mate?
Yeah, g'day, Noz, and hello, listeners. Yeah, well said, Noz. Obviously, regarding the devastating news surrounding Jai Arrow, that was incredibly tough news to hear when it came out, and obviously more so watching Jai being interviewed by Danica, as you said, it actually brought a tear to my eye. Our thoughts and prayers are with Jai and his family. May God bless them. And as you said, Noz, it does put a lot of things into perspective when you hear something like this. So let's turn to this week's rounds. Obviously, all eyes, no doubt, are on Wednesday night's Origin, plus some great NRL games this weekend. So as I always say, mate, over to you, Captain Noz, just to get our set started, mate. So over to you.
As you mentioned, JC, we have a jam-packed slate of things to talk about in this episode. We have an abbreviated speed round, so there are only 5 games over the weekend. That might, and I stress the word might, it might help keep us on time. What caught our eye? Only 5 games, but there was still plenty going on. You're going to catch up with a blue and white cult hero in the making. Mate, I'm also sticking around Belmore, the great Philip Ronald Gould, that attention-grabbing scamp. Mate, he caught my eye, maybe not in the way that he wanted to, but again, we'll be discussing that in that little segment. Now, the Grapple. JC, in some of our episodes, we've talked about being gazumped. In fact, it was the title of episode 12. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of inbuilt gazumping with the schedule. So this show is going to be released just before Origin. Most people are probably going to listen to it after the game. So everyone will be able to judge our Origin tips. I'm tipping personally that yours will be good. Mine will be the usual tripe. We've got our round preview. We're back to a full round this week. And it is the triumphant return of freeballing, JC. So it was on hiatus last week. It's your segment this week. Or is it? There might be a little bit of a twist in the tail. Our listeners will have to stick around and see what's happening. But JC, mate, it would not be an episode of NRL Offside if we didn't kick off with our patented speed round. It was a rare week this week where neither of our teams played, so we're going to have a little bit of a bounce in our step. We don't have to dissect our performances. It's much worse for me than it is for you, I suspect. But, mate, on to speed round. Okay, the Raiders versus the Dolphins. In the post-match press conference, Ricky Stewart said that he was confused. Well, we all are, Rick. How could a Raiders team that was so good a mere 12 months ago now be so bad? Playing at home, this Canberra team did what they've been doing all year, waxing and waning their way to another disappointing loss. This time against a Dolphins team that, despite being down 5 of their top-line players, certainly wasn't down on creativity and spirit. Led by their secret source of Isaiah Katoa, this Finns team is rounding into form quite nicely and is quickly becoming the team that everybody wants to watch, but nobody wants to play. And a big shout out to our old mate Kurt Donahue, another one of those great rugby league diamonds in the rough who has come from nowhere to become a vital cog in this growing Redcliffe juggernaut. Bulldogs versus Storm. Did Bronson Xerri and Matt Burton just single-handedly rescue the Dogs season? After a tumultuous week where they were yet again in the headlines for all of the wrong reasons, Canterbury put on an inspiring second half display led by Xerri and Burton's potent left edge that simply sliced the Storm to pieces. Melbourne, well, yet again they were second half bystanders, and their right edge defence. Oh, God. Nick Meaney and Will Warbrick, it was almost comically inept, which certainly helped the Dogs' cause. In answering my initial question, though, probably not. I don't think either of these teams are going to feature at the pointy end of the season, but for the Dogs at least it was a respite from a pretty grim last month. Dragons versus Warriors. Firstly, kudos to the fans, particularly those Dragons fans who braved some very ordinary conditions at Jubilee to watch this game. And again, if we're continuing with that positivity, the Saints, they tried very, very hard. Unfortunately, it ended there. They couldn't hold the ball in their attacking half or their defensive half. Speaking of defence, that swung from being flat-footed to clueless to ineffective. And the merest of comeback hopes in the last 7 or 8 minutes of the game, well, that was snuffed out in the most 2026 St George of ways with an intercept try to Dallin Watini's Lesniak, who plucked the ball out of an insipid Dragons attacking foray to score under the posts, flowing mullet and all. And speaking of dangerous, how about these Warriors? No Tanner Boyd, no Luke Metcalf, no worries. Tamari Martin, who is the most overqualified New South Wales Cup player we have, well, he simply stepped up, bagging 2 tries while leading the team around the park very, very nicely. Also worth noting that the likes of Adam Pomfrey and Murata Niokore can't even crack this Warriors first grade squad at the moment. Watch out, NRL.
Okay, let's move to Sea Eagles versus the Titans. This turned out to be a much tighter contest than probably most people were predicting, with both Manly and the Titans missing some key players due to origin duties. Remarkably, this was Manly's 7th win from their past 8 matches since Kieran Foran took over, which is an unbelievable turnaround. His influence on this side has been enormous. Not sure, though, he would have been overly happy with their performance. But look, 2 points is 2 points, and it now firmly cements Manly inside the top 4. So well done to the Eagles. Let's go to the Cowboys versus the Rabbitohs. Look, another strong performance from the Cowboys. Also, they were missing a few players for injury and also origin duties. Their past 8 weeks has been very consistent, winning 6 games, and it now firmly puts these guys inside the top 8. So, well done to the Cows and Toddy Payton. For the Rabbitohs, look, it just wasn't their day. There was obviously, plenty of emotion surrounding the news of Jai Arrow during the week. But I thought that Matt Duffy played really well, and it's great to see the winger on debut jagging a double. So well done to that young man as well.
Excellent. So I think we got through that in pretty quick time, JC. Maybe that's just what we need every week, 5 games rather than 8. Now, despite the fact that there was, again, an abbreviated slate of games, plenty of things happening on the field. What caught your eye, JC?
What caught my eye was from the Bulldogs versus Storm game. And in particular, it was the performance of a young Jack Underhill. But if you recall, Noz, I actually asked about him in our school chat in the lead up to the game. And it was purely because, mate, his name grabbed my attention. If you remember, I wrote in the chat, who is Jack Underhill? And lucky our good old schoolmate, Dr. Pete, ACCA Bulldogs pathway manager, Pete Daley, gave us his scouting report. If you remember, Pete said, mate, he looks good. I think he's about 21 or 22, been in the system a while, made his debut last game, and he's a big boy, quite mobile, doing well in reserves. Well, Pete, mate, he did pretty well in the big league as well, playing in the NRL in first grade. I actually thought the kid was outstanding. Ran with a lot of power, put in some nice shots. came up with an unbelievable charge down, and then had the confidence to back himself with a captain's challenge and actually won it. So I reckon this bloke, or this young bloke's going to be a bit of a Bulldogs fan favourite pretty quickly. The blonde hair actually had me thinking of a very young sort of Ben Hannett, sort of charging around again. So, yeah, I love this guy. I loved his interview after the game as well. He came across, very raw, very natural, quite an honest. You can tell he's got a bit of a humble sort of upbringing, and mate, he's just generally excited to be playing first grade. So, well done to Jack Underhill. Mate, if that performance was anything to go by, I think this kid's got a real bright future. So well done, Jack.
Yeah, and in what was a bleak week for the NRL, it was one of those things that really warms your heart. It's always great to see a young kid in his first couple of games, particularly bringing that enthusiasm and sheer joie de vivre for the game. Now, I don't want to pander to all of our Bulldogs supporting fans out there, JC, but I also have another one, which is coming from Belmore. Last week, Phil Gould was all over the news, or
Sure
mate,
was.
mate, all over the news in a bigger way than Phil Gould usually is. So on his own podcast and then in his interview with James Graham, it was almost like he was doing a little bit of a mid-season analysis of where the Bulldogs currently are. Now, this is an aside, JC. Mate, Gould is a future freeballing subject. He is a fascinating character. He's been around the game now for decades. I think the better part of 5 decades. Very influential. But I'm going to throw that one up to you. I think that'd be a perfect freeballing subject for the great JC. But
Noted.
that is for another day. In terms of the comments that he made on his podcast and in the interview with James Graham, mate, they were intriguing. They were an odd mix of insight and hogwash that pretty much underlined his position or his positions that a lot of people have commented about, those conflicting roles that he holds as a commentator and as a club administrator. And it also reminded me of something that I absolutely love, JC, and that's the post-game coaches' press conferences. Now, I'm one of those people that sit up an extra 45 to 50 minutes every Friday night just waiting for the coaches to come on and speak for 3 minutes, but I find them fascinating. A couple of reasons. Firstly, it's pretty much hot on the heels of the encounter, so the coaches have to come in, compose themselves, and then talk about what's transpired. But also, it's talking to a multitude of audiences. They're talking to the fans and the media. They're also sending messages to their players. In some areas, they're talking to their bosses, to the CEOs and to the members of their board. And it often becomes an exercise in decoding exactly what they're saying. And that was certainly the case with the comments from Phil Gould. He did say some really interesting things. I liked his sort of chat about where the Bulldogs are at the moment. So he described the Bulldogs' current woes in pretty interesting terms, saying that they were a team built with a specific goal in mind, that is having that old Dogs defensive DNA. And then with the changes in the game in 26, with the speeding up of the ruck and the set restarts, they were caught flat-footed. Again, Phil bringing some of his incisive expert commentary in that sense. There was also a few things that he said that were between the lines. And we talked about the levels that they often communicate at in those coaches' press conference. I think Gould was actually doing that as well. He talked about the playing group. He talked about how well they were training, about how cohesive they were. But I think the message was that games aren't played on a Tuesday, boys. Games are played on a Sunday. And he reinforced that, talking about the fact that some of them seem to get overwhelmed when they look at the scoreboard and see a few tries put on them. But my favourite part, JC, and he actually said this, was that the Dogs won the last hour of the game versus the Sharks. I'm going to actually take this into a bigger picture. I love this particular statement. I love it with a capital L. We most commonly see it in teams that get absolutely massacred. Now, I'm going to give a Parramatta example. Maybe it's time to put a P-word ban on me, but in round 1 of 2025, Jason Rolls came out and said that Parramatta won the second half against the Storm 12-10. The only problem with that is that they actually lost the first half 46-6. Now, I've been trying all week thinking about what will be a good analogy for this, and I think I'll come up with one, JC. But it's sort of like saying you won the end of the fight because you bit the ankle of your opponent after they'd knocked you flat onto your freckle. It makes absolutely no sense, particularly considering everything that's happened before makes everything that happens afterwards completely redundant. But in saying that, JC, I hope that coaches continue to do so. It gives all of us fans a real giggle, unless it's your team, and then it just makes you put your head in your hands. Now, I'll have to finish off with this, JC. So just to be fair to Gould, again, obviously he was playing 4D chess. The rest of us were just licking the checkers pieces. But what he said worked, because the Dogs subsequently came out on Friday night and played very, very well against the Melbourne Storms. Obviously, Phil Gould knows a lot more than us mere mortals. Okay, so on to the grapple. Now, I mentioned in the introduction, JC, that we've got a bit of an inbuilt gazumping with the grapple this week, but it's not going to deter us, mate. We're going to go onwards and upwards to our grapple Origin edition. Okay, your Origin predictions, JC. Let's go.
Okay. Look, there's been plenty of debate about both sides that were picked. Obviously, the Queensland made us how they left out Reece Walsh. It made it surprise the bejeebers out of me. And obviously for the Blues, apparently the team has no balance. And Victor Radley's selection sort of came from somewhere, wait for this, between Bondi and outer space. But look, as I said last week, I actually like the Blues side. I think the team is clearly in form, and it's clearly been picked as an attacking unit, built for sort of momentum, fast rucks, offload, support play. Now, the game's going to be most likely played in the wet at a core, and I think if that happens, it probably drags Queensland back into the contest a little bit more. I really felt if it was in more dry weather, I think New South Wales have them covered man for man. But look, as you know, whenever it rains, it can turn the Origin game into a completely different sport. Now, the other big thing that will be interesting to see is how the game is going to be refereed. Clearly, as I said, New South Wales have picked the team that's really about the sort of modern rules, quick play the ball, 6 against, fatigue through the middle. And my man, Teddy, sort of sniffing around, a bit like a Labrador who's found an open plate barbecue. So, it'll be interesting to see what the refs do if they put the whistle away. Which will definitely slow the game down. But either way, mate, I can't wait for Wednesday night's game. I can't wait for Victor Radley to run out as well. I think we all agree this guy is made for Origin. And look, overall, mate, I can't see anything bar a New South Wales victory. So for me, the Blues to win, my scoreline prediction, mate, I'm going to go for 24-10. And no surprise, my man Teddy will be man of the match.
I like it, being decisive with picking the score. Maybe what I don't like is that you're succumbing to your Roosters obsession. So Teddy, Radley, I mean, come on, give me a break. But, mate, you mentioned outer space, probably appropriately for the Radley selection. And, mate, that's in the vein of what I'm going to be talking about. So it is time for a ridiculous tangent alert, JC.
Tangent alert. Whoa.
That's it.
Where's your brain go? Where's your brain going now?
I mean, that's always the $64,000 question. Mate, for some reason, I have been doing a lot of thinking about the universe this week, JC. Now, I'm going to implore both you and the listeners to stick with me here. Now, there are a number of theories related to the infinite universe. That is the current thinking that the universe goes on forever and has no limits. Now, the first of those theories, JC, is that if the universe does go on forever, then reality must eventually repeat itself by chance. What that means is somewhere, either now or in the future, there is another JC and Noz doing exactly what we're doing right now, sitting at their kitchen tables talking about their version of the NRL in their particular universe. The second theory is a little bit different. It's the theory that's bamboozled moviegoers in all of the Marvel flicks, and that's the quantum many worlds interpretation. So that's where we exist in a parallel timeline which is shaped by different choices. Now, again, to put that into our context, Johnny, you and I will be doing a podcast on that parallel timeline, but it might be about Italian cuisine, or mate, you might be the Joe Rogan of that particular universe. Mate, you probably do a better job. Now, the question at this particular juncture is, why am I talking about this, JC? Well, mate, I think our esteemed Queensland coach, Billy Slater, has proved one of those theories, the quantum world theory of parallel timelines. Now, I cannot imagine, even in an infinite universe, that there would be someone, even a replica Billy, making as stupid a decision as to not pick Reece Walsh. Mate, I can't work it out. Even in an infinite
Me too.
universe, it's just ridiculous. Now, the question probably on everybody's lips at this particular moment is, why am I babbling about this? Well, I think it's a decision that will have a massive impact on the game. Now, I'm crossing the beams a little bit here, JC. We're going ridiculous tangent and lava take. Mate, Kalen Ponga. I think Kalen Ponga is the game's preeminent run up and down on the spot merchant. He does it stylishly. He sometimes does it effectively, but mate, his track record has shown that he isn't necessarily a winning footballer. But you know who is a winning footballer, JC? Mate, the reigning Clive Churchill medalist, Reece Walsh. Now, as it pertains to New South Wales have picked a very powerful team. It's got size, it's got strength across the park. We've seen at many times in the past that one of the ways to beat teams like this is to throw them off kilter, to just sort of push them a little bit out of their rhythm. And Queensland have left the premier off-kilter player in the competition sitting on the sideline. Now, for that reason, I'm going with New South Wales. It's a big, strong side. Cleary's going to be leading them around. The mail is that Moses won't be there, but if Burton comes into the team, that'll retain New South Wales' ability to put those long kicks in and drive Queensland into the corners. But I'm also really looking forward to the Manly duo of Olakau'atu and Kula. Mate, I think they're both going to have massive games. So I'm going much like yourself with New South Wales. The other thing, and this is an aside, probably a typical Noah aside, is it does mark one of the only times this year I'm going to be watching the telecast on Channel 9. Now, normally I watch on Foxtel. Mate, I'm a massive fan of Vonnie Sampson, Braith, MCR boy, Vossi, Dan Ganane. Mate, I'm looking forward to Channel 9. They seemingly try and prove the theory of infinite universes every time Origin rolls around by bringing out a stable of about 976 commentators. So, mate, I'm going to be looking forward to that to see what old Origin dinosaur they drag out of it. Okie doke. So, enough of that rambling gibberish, JC. Let's go on to the round preview. Mate, we've got a full slate of games. Mate, what do you got for us?
Okay, let's start with the Sharks versus the Sea Eagles. Look, I think with a lot of the games this round, it really depends on whether the Origin stars back up. Obviously, that's a bit of an unknown at this stage. But look, hopefully most of them can. Either way, this game shapes up as quite a cracking contest. Friday night at a cold and probably wet Shark Park. It is never an easy assignment for any side. I'm actually leaning towards Manly to continue their winning run. Mate, they just look confident and well balanced at the moment. The Sharks, a bit like South this year, they've just been very, very inconsistent. One week they look like genuine contenders. The next, mate, you're sort of left scratching your head. So, I think the Eagles can get the job done down in Shark Park.
Mate, you just said it. I think this game hinges on whatever Sharks team turns up. If you look at their record, they've downed the Dogs, the Tigers, and the Warriors. That was a particularly impressive performance. And if that team turns up in with a chance, the only problem that they've got is that we're all pretty sure what Manly team will front, the same one that's been terrorising the league over the last 7 weeks. There were some really encouraging signs for Manly. You said in speed round that Foran may have been disappointed with their performance against the Titans. Mate, that's one way of looking at it, but they were really stout in defence. Gold Coast do have a bit of attacking potency. They threw a bit at them, and Manly stood pretty tall in that game. So I'm going for Manly. I think it becomes a little bit more of a challenge if Kula and Olakau'atu don't suit up, but mate, they're playing really well at the moment, and I can't see the Sharks getting over them.
Let's go to the Knights versus your mob, the Eels. Mate, I'm calling them the rejuvenated Knights. Yeah, take on a pretty injury-hit Eels up in Newcastle. I think the Knights just look, full of confidence at the moment, especially across their back line where they've got pretty much strike everywhere. If they get momentum early, I think they should be able to control this one.
I'll be watching this one between my fingers, I think, JC, especially if that Knights backline is humming. They're a real sight to behold when they're on song. Now, traditionally, Para haven't been that bad in Newcastle, But again, mate, it all depends on whether or not they can stop the opposition scoring. And against this new Knights team with plenty of firepower, I don't think that they'll be able to. Parramatta do have some big ins. I was reading the Mail and it looks like Iongi will be back at fullback. Riley Smith is also an in. And this guy has actually been playing quite well. It's one of our younger forwards, Sam Tuivasa. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be trumped by the biggest of outs. Mitch Moses looks like he suffered his customary mid-season injury that's going to probably push him out to round 4 2027. So, mate, the Knights. I think the Knights are absolute red hots in this game.
No, mate, just a little observation. You know, one big difference between you and I can never, ever tip against my team, the Roosters, but you can quite comfortably tip against your guys. I can't believe you do that.
Well, mate, again, we often talk about the great Marty Doran. And, mate, this stems back to a conversation I had with Marty about 20 years ago when Souths were terrible. And I was agonising about the fact that I can't tip against Parramatta. And, mate, over our beers, Marty looked me square in the eyes and he said, Noz, I go for Souths. We seriously win. We seriously win 2 games every year. He said, if I'm in a tipping competition and picking Souths automatically, I'm starting the competition on minus 22. There's absolutely no point. So, mate, if I was actually tipping Parramatta every week, I'd be starting on like minus 19. I might as well just like give my money away.
Too funny. All right, let's keep rolling. Let's go to the Tigers versus the Bulldogs. Yeah, I'm probably calling them the out of form Tigers. Yeah, against the desperate Bulldogs side at the moment. If we go off the Dogs' second half performance against Melbourne, as Gus mentioned, mate, there were definitely signs that something was starting to click. Now the game's actually been played at Combank, which probably takes a little bit of that sort of traditional, I don't know, Leichhardt or Campbelltown home ground edge that the Tigers usually thrive on. So I think the Dogs will go back to back, and I'm looking forward to watching our cold hero Jack Undies get some more big minutes and hopefully play strong again. So I think the Dogs will get this one.
Mate, for all the tipsters out there, good luck picking this one. Mate, both of these teams have had the trajectory of a bumblebee in season 26. They've been up, they've been down, they've been backwards, forwards, sideways. Mate, it's got me absolutely stuffed. But I've said this a couple of times. I think I'm entering into dangerous territory, JC. I think the Dogs turned it around last week. Now, one of the knocks about Cameron Ciraldo has been that he's been relatively pig-headed, but even he must have seen the future, and the future is get the ball to Burton, get the ball to Jerry, give them a bit of space. For that reason, I am tipping them this week. I think the Tigers' defence is very suspect, and those big edge bodies will really run rampant.
Okay, let's go to the Storm versus my boys. Look, mate, historically, Melbourne, as you know, has been a pretty big bogey side for the Roosters, especially down in Melbourne. Mate, that said, the Chooks did manage a pretty amazing win last time when they played. I think it was towards the end of last season with a convincing performance. This game will really depend on which Origin players back up for both sides, and obviously you know how fresh they're going to be. If both sides have their stars on the park, I think it sets up a pretty good clash. But I think my boys can get the win. But as I said, it really depends if a few of my guys will play. They should be motivated to hopefully bounce back after that pretty poor loss versus the Cowboys a week before. So I think the Chooks can get the job done down in Melbourne.
Mate, that's a massive surprise. I didn't think you'd tip the Roosters. Now, mate, there's a couple of storylines with this Melbourne team that are really interesting. The first one is that Bellamy fairy dust that he sprinkles on trundlers to make them above average, even good. It seems to be wearing off this year. We've got the likes of Meaney, McDonald, Chan. Mate, they have just turned back into pumpkins. And it's really obvious. The second one, and I've stolen this take from my mate Huss. Mate, they're really struggling with the new sped up ruck. Now, again, all of us Melbourne naysayers will get out there and say that a lot of their dominance over the last quarter century has been built on their dirty tricks at the play the ball. Mate, that's really been nullified, and that might be the real reason that they've slipped in 2026. Now, the Roosters, they have a few backing up from Origin. I think that's going to be their most pressing concern in going into this game. But, mate, they'll be smarting after their unexpected loss against the Cowboys. I think they're going to be fired up for this one, JC, and I think they're going to win quite easily. They've historically had some issues down in Melbourne, but I can't see the Roosters losing this one, mate.
Let's go to the Broncos versus the Dragons. Mate, I can't see any joy for the Dragons in this one, unfortunately. Even though the Broncos are coming off a few losses. Mate, a Sunday afternoon at Suncorp is, is usually the perfect stage for the Broncos to respond, and I think they'll come out with plenty of intent. The Broncos, mate, they've just got too much strike power across the park, and this one feels like the type of game where I think they can probably click back into gear. I'm expecting Brisbane to bounce back quite strongly, and I think they'll be led around by the guy that didn't play Origin, and that's Reece Walsh. So Broncos to win this one quite comfortably.
Mate, the Broncos are currently languishing. Languishing, I like that word, JC. It rolls at languishing. I'll say it again. I think it's probably the perfect word for them at the moment. They're sitting at 14th. They're the defending premiers. They need to turn things around quick, smart before the season gets away from them. And what better way to turn things around than a game against St. George? But JC, when I was reviewing the round, I have the slightest inkling of a gut feel here. Now, every loss brings the Dragons closer to a victory. Mate, the Dragons? No. Actually, I should push that down. Maybe that's just the enchiladas from last night, mate. The gut feel there. Of course, the Broncos. No, don't go on one of your ridiculous tips. There's also mail that Haas is going to return. So if he does, then that's probably another nail in the coffin of the poor old Dragons this weekend.
Let's go to the Raiders versus the Cowboys. This one here shapes up as a really entertaining contest. You've got two young attacking sides that can pretty much score from anywhere. Though at times both teams can probably treat defence not so great. So let's see. And look, even though the game is going to be played down in Canberra, I'm actually leaning towards the Cowboys. They're really starting to show some genuine consistency, and the team looks very settled at the moment with the right balance of a couple of those old heads with probably some of the best attacking young kids in the comp. So I think the Cowboys can get the job done down in a cold Canberra.
Matt, whatever I say about this game, it's not going to match what you just said. They both treat defence not so great. That's probably the perfect encapsulation of both these teams this season. Mate, it is a classic resistible force versus movable object, this game. The Cowboys have traditionally been a woeful away team. And, mate, this is iteration of Canberra. They can't seem to jag a win at home, despite the fact they play in the most cold and miserable stadium in the NRL that nobody wants to visit. Now, both these teams' Origin stars will be back. But I'm going for the Cowboys, and God, I've got no confidence whatsoever. But last month or so, they've been showing plenty of verve, spirit. Again, I just think they'll get over a Canberra team that's got neither of those two things, mate.
All right, let's go to the game of the round, and this one's going to be a beauty. Panthers versus the Warriors. Look, for mine and probably for most people, I think these two teams have clearly been the most consistent all season. I'm actually hoping, most of the Origin boys can back up, because this has the potential, as you said, to be clearly one of the games of the year. I think the power and the energy of the Warriors against the clinical, sort of suffocating style of Penrith, mate, the Panthers just have that ability just to sort of strangle teams, build pressure and, really sort of take the life out of you. I generally can't wait to watch this one, because I think it's going to tell us a lot about the premiership race. If the Warriors win, I think it confirms that they're a legitimate title threat. But if the Panthers sort of control the game in the way that they often do, I just think it probably reinforces Penrith as clearly the benchmark to win this year's competition. So I'm actually going to go for the Panthers, and I'm really looking forward to watching this one on the weekend.
I think this game's all about the Warriors. So are they contenders? Are they pretenders? This Panthers outfit is custom made to beat teams who have a bit of wind in their sail, who look like they might be onto something. And that's the Warriors, certainly for the first part of the season. In saying that, I think the Warriors will actually make a good fist of this. Penrith will have to contend with their massive forward pack. I don't think the Penrith forwards are anywhere near as potent as they were a couple of seasons ago. Also, something which I know people talk about quite a bit, but Andrew Webster came out of that Penrith stable, and he seems to be the most successful of those coaches who has come out from under Ivan Cleary. I think he knows what it takes to beat the Panthers. So that's going to be another interesting quirk which is actually thrown into the mix. Still, I'm going with the Panthers. They had last week off. They do have a few people backing up from Origin, but again, mate, this Penrith team is rolling, and I think there'll be a little bit too much for the Warriors at home. Okie doke. So, Johnny, it's freeballing. I mentioned that freeballing was on hiatus last week. We had to have 2 grapples to deal with all of the news that was swirling around the NRL. But it is back this week, or is it? I mentioned there was a little bit of a twist in the tail for freeballing this week, JC. Mate, I'm not entirely sure it fits. I've seen your notes. I know what you're going to be talking about. Now, freeballing is usually the sort of free association gibberish that comes from me. So, mate, this week we are appropriately rebadging it. We've got a new pseudo segment, JC. Wait for it. Wait for it. It is the wit and wisdom of JC. So don't disappoint, mate. What have you got for us?
Okay, seeing it's Origin week, I thought I'd dive in a bit more Origin talk, and specifically, I wanted to talk about Laurie Daley's coaching record for New South Wales. As you probably know, Loz has had 2 stints as the Blues coach. First stint was 2013 to 2017, and then he came back again last year, and obviously he's the coach this season. Now, it's pretty fair to Loz that that first stint was played against probably the greatest Queensland Origin side ever assembled. So his success rate wasn't that great, up against the likes of Cameron Smith, Thurston, Inglis, Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, etc. These are guys pretty much at the peak of their powers. But when you have a look at Loz's Origin coaching record at purely numbers, it's not great. Across his 6 Origin series as a coach, his record stands as 1 series win, 5 series losses. And hear this, out of the 21 matches that he's coached the Blues, he's only jagged 7 wins. So you wouldn't call it an amazing record on paper. So when Laurie returned for his second stint, things actually started brilliantly for Loz. New South Wales won the game 1 quite comfortably, and everyone was saying that Loz is back. But then somehow, mate, the Blues lost the next 2 games, and the series slipped away again. And clearly, the pressure is back on Loz for this year's series. Loz has always been a guy that's been quite loyal to his players, not overly risky with his selections. But this year, he's definitely picked a side based on form and attacking football. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can bring all of these superstar personalities together and get New South Wales over the line. Because if he can't, I doubt he coaches Origin again, especially with Ivan Cleary in the background with his recent news. But as always, go the Blues. And as I said earlier, my prediction still is a 24-10 scoreline. So, Loz, don't let me down, mate.
Now, onto the outrage, Johnny. Mate, it's been another fantastic program. It's gone by in the blink of an eye, but we have to finish, as we have done for the last few weeks, with Vox Popping. So that's our segment where we give the feedback from our listeners. Now, I have unapologetically stolen this one from you, JC. It's from your mate, Asher. You've mentioned him a couple of times. He is the massive West Tigers fan who hates me. Asher, mate, you can continue to hate me if you keep coming up with brilliant stuff like this. Now, I'm going to quote the message that he sent to you, JC. The woke nonsense about lifting the Roosters ban due to bullying was clearly premature, as your Radley comments were insanity. Now, somewhere, Johnny, your Joe Rogan parallel universe counterpart is bristling at being called woke. But, mate, there's a little bit more than that, exacerbated by the screenshot that you sent with that actual message. Now, I don't know if you realize this or not. I'm going to try and display it, but I can see the top of your reply, which stated, Victor will have a blinder in, and I couldn't see the rest of the message. Now, I am hoping, Johnny, that the remainder of that sentence was the warm-up or the post-match function or on the golf course the morning of the game, because, mate, if that's not the case, that R-word ban is looming, JC. I can see you spiraling, mate. I need to do something here. But what was your feedback, mate?
A couple of things this week. I got a message from our great mate Stu Otto during the week, and he said to me that he listens to the show while he's running up and down the South Coogee stairs, all 225 of them one way. So that's a pretty serious effort by Stu. So, mate, thanks for tuning in, and just not too sure if listening to me and Noz on the podcast is helping your training, or it's probably maybe making those stairs feel a little bit longer. Second one I got was I've also introduced a show to a good friend, a former work colleague. Her name is Nicole Parker. Now, look, Nicole's not exactly a hardcore NRL fan, but I think we may have converted her. She said to me after listening to her first show, she said it's very good. And then she immediately asked, how much prep do you guys actually do? So I told her we do tens of hours, but no, it's good. It's good to have her on board. And then, mate, just a fresh one. Last night when I was at the gym, I always finish up a session in the sauna. And I had about a 10 or 12-minute chat with James Bracey. So I think everyone knows Bracey as the Channel 9 footy presenter. So we spoke a lot about the Bears. Obviously, he's got a role where he's on the board of the Bears. He mentioned that they'll angling for some sort of salary cap relief through sort of third-party payments. So watch this space. He reckons a marquee player is imminent, so I'm looking to see who that could be. He also mentioned that Benny Eichen would be a good replacement for Abdo as the incoming CEO, so you can see a bit of a North Sydney link there. And then, mate, I couldn't help myself at the end of our little chat just to tell him about the podcast. So he wishes all the best for today's program. So hopefully we've got a listener in James Bracey going forward. So there's my three little bits and pieces from people talking about our show, mate. So we're getting some impact now.
Well, that's another great example of your fantastic networking skills. But my blood did run a little bit cold because I realised when you were talking about Brace that I'd spent about 2 minutes bagging Channel 9. It was all in jest, James. It was all in jest. I didn't really mean it. So hopefully James, along with the other listeners, is scurrying to the subscribe button on either Spotify or on YouTube to make sure that he follows and subscribes. Now, we've mentioned this a few times. I promise I'll put it in the notes this week. I haven't for the last couple of programs, but we do have an email account, nrloffside@gmail.com. So please send through your thoughts, guys. As mentioned, I think our listeners are sometimes better at this than we are. So it'd be great to hear from as many of you as possible. But as always, guys, we very much appreciate you listening this week. Go the Blues, and hope everyone has a fantastic week.
Stay well, everyone. Go the Blues.